Hello, my name is Chip Dodd with Support Services of Virginia. This video is about the Fair Labor Standards Act and the regular rate final rule. This is specifically applies to non-exempt employees who are working two different pay rates in the same work week and they get overtime, or they get a non-discretionary bonus that needs to be factored into their overtime calculation properly. This is very wonky. It's going to have a little bit of math and calculations. But it's a very important video for companies who want to first pay their people right and avoid the fines and penalties of either the Department of Labor or let's say a disgruntled employee finds out that they're not getting the correct amount of overtime. They could actually sue the company to get to their money. It could even spread. If it's a systemic thing across a company, it could also spread to other employees. So let's learn today how to do this calculation correctly. Let me go ahead and do a quick screen share. First, I'm going to give you, let's see here. I apologize for the pause. Let's do a quick screen share. Those are my files. 1 second. Okay, first up, all I did is I went in and I Googled regular rate final rule. That pops up the Department of Labor's website right here, final rule, regular rate under Fair Labor Standards Act. When I clicked on that, it took me to this page. If you scroll down, it takes you to this regular rate final rule presentation. This is going to give you the information, the exact information from the Department of Labor I used to build the spreadsheet I'm going to be showing you in just a minute. Here's that presentation, just so you know. If you scroll way down, I actually have it highlighted so I can find it easily. This slide is the one that basically I built the calculator so that it would mimic the Department of Labor's calculations, especially in regards to a discretionary bonus. But either way, don't just believe me. I'm not a labor attorney. I'm just a guy trying to run a company within the Fair Labor Standards Act. Read this presentation yourself and verify that my math is right, please. Okay, so now that you see where I got my information, let's go ahead and jump into the spreadsheet. And I'm making the spreadsheet available, especially agencies in my industry, because I want to help them get it right. Many payroll companies, by the way, do not do the math right, or they do the math correct, the employee is paid properly, but it's not displayed correctly to the employee in regards to their weighted overtime rate. And so the employee can't back math their check properly to make sure their employer is paying them correctly. So either way, what I do is I use this spreadsheet to make sure that we are properly paying my employees. So the way I build all my spreadsheets, anything green is a data entry point, anything red is a formula. So it's basically don't mess with anything unless it's green. Of course, if you're an Excel guru, back math it, play with it, whatever, nothing's locked or hidden. Have fun with it. So let's start off. Basically, Department of Labor says overtime occurs in 1 week. So it's not like you can spread it over a 2-week period, but most people have a 2-week paycheck. And so I'm giving this example, or the spreadsheet we built, because my company pays with a two-week paycheck, is I can run 2 different scenarios in 2 different weeks, and then it all feeds into one calculation on the total net amount that the employee would get paid. And I am not including any of the nuisance charges, FUTA, SUTA, benefits, all that. This is just their actual pay. That's it. I'm not getting into the other calculations. So let's look at how this works real fast. In this situation, you have 2 different service locations. There's different amount of hours worked at each of these locations. And then there's a different rate at each location. In my specific scenario, if there is a customer that has COVID, I'm going to give my staff a $2 hazard pay reward per hour for going into that site that's got COVID. But for whatever reason, in this situation, it goes from 11 to 15. Doesn't matter what the numbers are, you put it. The way Department of Labor wants this done is you basically, this is called straight pay. So it's the 30 times the 11 equals the 330, 15 times 15 equals 225. If you look here, it's 45 hours. So there is some overtime, but nobody cares about overtime right now. All we're doing is coming up with a straight pay. All of that ended up being 555. So at this point, they've been paid all the time they are owed. They have not been paid the half on the 5 hours. So stop thinking that overtime is the minute they get to the 41st hour, it's time and a half. Stop thinking 1.5. We need to start thinking as it, you pay them straight time for all hours, including the ones over 40. And then you go back and you calculate their average weighted rate, and then you times that by 0.5 to give them what they're owed on the overtime. So watch how this works. This comes down to this 555, so that's their straight pay. In this scenario on the left, there is no discretionary, no non-discretionary bonus, meaning performance bonus that you've agreed on with that employee. So think like, if you make your sales target, I will give you an extra $100, that type of thing. That's called a non-discretionary bonus. A discretionary bonus is, Chip feels good at the end of the year. I got a little too much profit. I'm going to give everybody $100. They didn't know it was coming. That's a discretionary bonus. It does not have to be factored into their overtime. But in this scenario, there is no bonus at all on the non-discretionary side. So there's the straight pay, same as it was up here. Their average pay rate is $12.33. So basically, you just take the 555, you divide it by the 45 hours, and that comes up with their average pay rate, which, as you can see, it's a little bit between 11 and 15. Well, now we got to pay them overtime. So 12.33 is their average pay rate. So the overtime has to be based on the 12.33. You've got 5 hours of overtime. 1/2 of the 12.33 is the 6.17. So that's half of that straight pay amount. So the weighted overtime rate is the 12 plus the 617, or 12.33 plus 617. So the 18.50 is their overtime rate that they should be calculating the overtime based on their paycheck. So the amount that we actually owe them, because at this point we've paid them the 555, we had to come in here and figure all this out. We have to add on $30.83 to the 555 to get to the total amount of money that they are owed. What's displayed to the employee is in this block, right? Because they want to know how much regular pay I had at 40 hours and how much overtime I was paid. Let me escape out of that. Basically at the 1.5, because employees think that it's 1.5. The average person thinks it's 1.5. So I converted it from the Department of Labor straight pay plus 0.5 over to the typical thought process of the 1.5. Okay, so down here, this is the total straight pay plus the weighted overtime pay. So that's the total amount they get paid. And in this scenario, because I want to show you the difference between before and after, how the non-discretionary or discretionary bonuses are calculated. In this scenario, I'm just going to give them a $50 bonus just because I felt good. They had no idea it was coming. It's completely discretionary. It does not have to be factored into their overtime. So 585 was the amount that I owed them for the actual work they did at the 2 different locations. I'm going to give them the $50. There's their total pay, $635.83. So now let's go into the same scenario on week 2. Everything is exactly the same. I got the 555 straight pay, but in this situation, I'm giving them a performance bonus. Good job, Johnny. You didn't have any call-offs all week. I'm going to give you an extra $50 because you're a swell guy. He knows it's coming. I've made this deal with him ahead of time. If he doesn't have any call-offs, he gets $50. I have to factor that into their overtime. So now his total straight pay is 605, no longer the 555. So now to come up with his average pay rate, I've got to take the 605 divided by the 45. So he makes 1344, quite a bit different than over here at the 1233. That's why it messes with the overtime count. Same number of hours, 5. Half this weighted overtime rate is 672, right? 13 divided by 2 is 6. So his equivalent weighted overtime rate is 20.17, right? It's the 1344 plus the 672, 20.17. Way more overtime rate than over here on the 1850. So 3361 is the amount I owe on this time because it was factored in up here. Now let's get to what the employee sees. Quite a bit different than over here. Quite a bit meaning it's a few bucks. Now down here is where it gets interesting. Okay, so here's the total I've paid out at this point. This one's roughly $50 more than that one, plus a couple bucks. I am not giving them a discretionary bonus in this one because I put it up here as a non-discretionary. The total amount of pay is $638.61. So what's the difference? How much? If we miscalculated this by putting the bonus in the wrong spot and calculating correctly, how much have we ripped off that employee? So in the scenario where I calculated the discretionary bonus properly, before overtime, he was paid $638. Over here where it's a, I'm sorry, this was non-discretionary bonus. This is discretionary. He's paid $635. The difference there is $2.78. Not a lot of money. Some employees, though, it's a lot of money, but not a lot of money, $2.78 if you did it incorrectly. But at the end of the day, just like that movie Office Space, where with the little 1 pennies at a time, they all add up into millions. Let's say you had 200 employees, and instead of properly calculating their performance bonuses here, you're putting them down here. You are systematically ripping off the employee $2.78 every week for every employee. Starts adding up, and it's in favor of the employer. So if any of the employees get wind of it, attorneys start coming around, lawsuits start happening, and the fines and penalties are crushing. Of course, all of this ends up into their gross pay. Go ahead and double click this and open it up. And it kind of shows, okay, this is the total pay for that entire period, given all the different bonuses. And this is basically what it's going to look like to the employee, right? On their pay stub, they should see how many regular hours they worked, how many overtime hours they worked, what was the regular pay, what's their overtime pay. Some employers, I'm trying to get a payroll company that could do this. I would like to also see how many hours at this rate and how many hours at this weighted overtime rate. I want to see that on their paycheck so that the employee can back math how we did it. I have yet to find a payroll company that can get that math correct. But again, you try it yourself and get them to do it. Also, you got the 2 bonuses listed out. I strongly recommend provider to don't just have one bucket that says bonus. One needs to be a discretionary and non-discretionary, which is the legal terms for it. But you could call it performance bonus, but in the back of your mind, you know that is a non-discretionary, and then Christmas bonus or something like that could be a discretionary. It's up to you to come up with the language that you want, but either way, the employee needs to kind of know it, or if the Department of Labor audits you, you need to be able to kind of differentiate which one's which so that you can make sure that information has been factored into the paycheck. I did hang out a little carrot over here that this number is not included in this calculation because it's already been factored into the overtime. So if the employee's trying to add this up, it isn't going to work because it's already baked into these numbers up here. That is the end of my presentation. I'm not sure how long that was. Hopefully it made sense. Highly suggest running some different scenarios here and seeing if your payroll company is properly calculating both the pay rate for 2 different service locations, but also this discretionary or non-discretionary bonus. Make sure it's working. It especially gets complicated when they do both 2 pay rates and they get a non-discretionary bonus. The math starts getting kind of hard. Some payroll companies aren't able to do it, but it's up to you. You cannot sue your payroll company for not getting the math right. It is on the employer for the liability to make sure that they're properly paying their employees. Also, if you need a labor attorney, the person who taught me everything I know about this, in addition to the Department of Labor, his name is Barry Dorans at Wolcott, Rivers, and Gates here in the Virginia Beach area. If you have any questions on this, I am not an attorney. Don't do what I told you. Call him or call an attorney like him that specializes in labor force issues for employers, and they can make sure that you are properly paying your employees. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for checking it out. And then I guess comment on YouTube, and I would be happy to respond and answer any questions. Thank you so much for watching.